I used to think Christmas Eve was the safest night of the year. It's the night people lock their worries outside, pour a drink, and let the world fade into warm lights and soft music. But after what happened in December of 1998, I don't think I'll ever feel safe on that night again. I was living in a small town in Colorado then, the kind of place where winter always looked like a postcard. The snow piled high on the rooftops, the streets were quiet after dark, and the forest behind our house stretched for miles. My wife and I had just finished wrapping the last of the presents. Our two kids had gone to bed hours earlier, and the only sound in the house was the soft crackling of the fire. Around 11 o'clock, I heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from the fireplace. At first, I laughed. "Guess Santa's running late this year," I said to my wife. She smiled, half asleep on the couch, and rolled her eyes. But the sound came again, louder this time. A dry, dragging scrape, like something with nails instead of fingers was clawing its way down the brick. I crouched beside the hearth, thinking maybe a bird or squirrel had fallen in. I called softly up the chimney. "Hey, you okay up there?" No answer. Just the echo of my own voice. I grabbed the flashlight and opened the iron grate halfway. The beam caught nothing but black ash. But the moment I moved the grate, a gust of freezing air rushed out, strong enough to blow out the candle on the mantel. The fire, which had been burning bright, sputtered like it was choking. And that's when I saw it. The ashes on the floor weren't scattered anymore. They had shifted. There were two perfect handprints pressed into the soot, palms, fingers, and even faint nail marks, as if someone had pressed their hands down and pulled themselves out of the fireplace. My blood turned to ice. I called for my wife. She came over thinking I was playing some kind of prank until she saw the prints herself. Her smile disappeared. I ran to check the doors and windows. Every lock was in place, except one, the living room window. It was unlatched. A tiny draft blew through the gap, fluttering the curtains. We always kept it locked, every night. The kids even teased me about being paranoid about it. I stepped outside with my flashlight. Snow crunched under my boots as I circled around to the back of the house. The forest loomed behind us, silent and endless. The light from the house only reached a few feet before it vanished into darkness. And that's when I found them. Footprints. They started at the edge of the woods, a straight path through the untouched snow, and led directly to the chimney. Not to the door, not to the window, straight to the chimney. They were large, heavy prints. Whatever made them wasn't wearing boots. The impressions were uneven, like bare feet with long toes pressed deep into the snow. The tracks stopped exactly beneath the fireplace, and then there was another set leading away, back toward the forest. But halfway through the yard, they just stopped, like whoever made them vanished into thin air. I called the police. When they arrived, the first thing they asked was whether anyone in the family might have been outside recently. I told them no. My kids were asleep, my wife hadn't left the house, and I'd been inside all night. They inspected the chimney with a flashlight. One of the officers looked down inside and said, "Sir, there's something odd here." He reached up into the lower bricks and pulled out what looked like a long piece of cloth, thin, gray, and stiff, as if it had been frozen solid. He shrugged and said maybe an animal dragged it in. But there were no signs of fur or droppings, no feathers, nothing. They told us to keep the fireplace sealed and promised to have animal control come by in the morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound in the house felt louder than it should have been. The ticking clock, the shifting wood, and the faint howl of the wind through the trees. Around 3 a.m., just when I thought I was finally drifting off, I heard it again. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I shot upright in bed. My wife was already awake, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. "It's coming from the chimney," she whispered.
We both sat there, listening,
The sound was slow, deliberate, almost rhythmic, like someone dragging metal across stone. Then, silence. Total silence. I got up, grabbed the baseball bat from the closet, and crept into the living room. The ashes were scattered again. The handprints were gone. But now, right beside the hearth, were two wet footprints, bare, human-shaped, as if something had just climbed out of the chimney and stood there, watching us. I backed away, every instinct screaming to run. But before I could move, the lights flickered, the bulbs buzzed, dimmed, and then went completely dark. The only light left was the faint orange glow from the dying fire. In that glow, for a split second, I saw something reflected in the glass of the window. A tall, thin figure standing behind me, hunched, its head tilted sideways. Its outline was faint, like smoke trapped in glass. When I spun around, nothing was there. The power came back a few seconds later. The reflection was gone, but the footprints, they were still wet. The police came back the next morning. They searched the woods, checked for trespassers, and even brought a canine unit. The dogs refused to go near the trees. They just whined, tails down, ears flat. No one could explain the footprints, or the handprints, or why the snow behind our house looked wiped clean, as if something heavy had been dragged through it and erased every trace of what had happened. The officers eventually wrote it up as an unexplained disturbance. That's all it became in the records. Just words on paper. We sealed the fireplace the next day, moved out the following summer. It's been over 20 years now, and I still dream about that night. The scraping, the cold rush of air, the handprints in the ash. I wake up every December to that same sound echoing in my mind. And though I live hundreds of miles away from that house, I still check the fireplace every Christmas Eve. Because sometimes, just as the clock nears midnight, I swear I hear it again. Faint at first, but growing louder. Scrape, scrape, scrape. And every time I wonder, did something try to get in that night? Or had it already been inside all along?
I used to love Christmas carols. They meant warmth, comfort, and childhood memories. Growing up in a small town in rural Ontario, the choir walking house to house every December was the highlight of winter. But in 2013, something else came to my street that night. Something that sang, but wasn't human. It happened 2 days before Christmas. I remember the exact time, 12:07 a.m., because I had just finished cleaning up after a long shift at work, and the oven clock was the only light in my kitchen. The night was unusually still. Outside, the snow lay untouched, the roads silent, the air heavy enough that you could almost taste the frost. I was alone, my parents were out of town, and my sister was spending the holiday with her fiancé. I was wrapping their gifts when I heard it, singing, soft at first, like a faint hum carried gently by the wind. I laughed without thinking. Seriously? Carolers? At midnight? It wasn't that unusual. Our town had a history of random late-night singing groups. Drunk teenagers, bored adults, nostalgic seniors. It happened. But as I got up and stepped closer to the window, something felt wrong. The melody was familiar. An old hymn called Every Star Above Bethlehem, one I hadn't heard in years. But the voices, they were too perfect. All in the same tone, all moving in the exact same breath, not harmonizing, not layered.
Just one unified sound split into several mouths. It was unnatural. Curiosity beat fear. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek through. 3 figures stood in the street, old-fashioned clothes, long, heavy coats, scarves wrapped stiffly around their necks. Their silhouettes illuminated by the pale yellow glow of the street lamp. But they weren't moving, not rocking to the rhythm, not swaying to the cold, not shifting their weight, just standing, completely still, like mannequins placed in the snow. Their heads were tilted slightly upward, their faces hidden in shadow, and their mouths moved with mechanical precision, all at the same time, every syllable identical. That was the first thing that terrified me. The second thing came a moment later. The street lamp above them flickered, and when it did, the 3 figures cast no shadows. Everything else had one. The mailbox, the trees, the stop sign, but them? Nothing. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked back behind the curtain, hard athemic to have to sing or chaining. The singing stopped instantly, cut off mid-word, like someone pressed mute on the world. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I felt my lungs burning. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Maybe my eyes were tired. Maybe the snow played tricks with the light. But then it happened. Something whispered my name. Not shouted, not called out playfully, whispered, calmly, slowly, right outside my window. My entire body went cold. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. The voice came again, clearer, almost curious. "Are you watching?" I stumbled backward and hit the counter hard enough to knock over a mug. The crash echoed through the house. I forced myself to look again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought they'd be gone. But when I peeked through the curtain, they weren't on the street anymore. They were closer, standing on the sidewalk directly in front of my house. Still motionless, still perfectly aligned, still staring upward, but now angled slightly toward my window. I couldn't see their faces, only their pale, stiff mouths frozen in that unnatural, almost smile. I ran for my phone and dialed the police. The dispatcher asked if I was safe inside. I told her yes, though I didn't believe it. Within 10 minutes, 2 officers arrived. They approached the area carefully, shining their flashlights up and down the road. But by the time they got there, the figures were gone. Not walking away, not running, not leaving footprints in the fresh snow. Just gone, as if they'd melted into the night. The officers checked the street and the yards. One of them even walked into the road where I had seen them. He shined his flashlight around and said, "There's nothing here. No prints, no tracks, no sign anyone was standing out here at all." I felt sick. He asked if maybe I saw shadows, if the music came from a speaker, if someone was playing a prank. I shook my head. I knew what I saw, what I heard. The officers eventually left with a polite but skeptical smile. I stayed awake until sunrise, checking every window, every blind, every curtain. When daylight finally came, I allowed myself to breathe again. I almost convinced myself it was a hallucination, but then I walked past the living room window and everything in me froze. There, drawn on the outside of the frosted glass, were 3 perfectly shaped fingerprints. Long, thin, pressed with unnatural precision. They formed a small arc, like someone had been leaning in, watching. But it gets worse. Between those 3 fingerprints, written faintly into the frost, was a single word: listen. As if they wanted me to hear them again, as if the music wasn't over. I scrubbed the window clean with water and towels, hands shaking the whole time. I tried to act normal for the rest of the day, tried to forget. But that night, while I was lying in bed, I heard humming, soft, slow, perfectly in sync, right outside my bedroom wall. The same hymn, the same 3 voices. Too close, way too close. I moved out a month later, changed towns, changed jobs, changed my number. But every December, without fail, when the temperature drops and the nights turn silent, I hear that song again, somewhere far away at first, then drifting closer and closer until it sounds like it's right outside my house. I don't look out the window anymore. I don't check. I don't listen. Because I know what's waiting out there.
3 figures in old coats, perfect voices, motionless bodies, and mouths that move like they're sharing the same breath. Not human, never were, and this time they know my name.
Christmas was never supposed to feel like this. Cold, empty, heavy. Before 2003, it was my daughter's favorite holiday. She'd decorate the tree with uneven ornaments, string paper snowflakes around the living room, and insist that Santa was definitely real, because magic needs believers. But after she passed away, Christmas didn't feel magical anymore. It felt like a punishment. I avoided everything that reminded me of her. Songs, lights, even the taste of hot chocolate. I worked every holiday shift I could at the diner just to stay away from the memories waiting for me inside my own home. People talk about grief like it softens over time. Mine didn't. Mine sharpened, grew fangs, and bit deeper each year. Christmas 2005 was supposed to be just another night I survived by keeping myself busy, but that night became something else, something I still don't fully understand. My shift ended late, nearly 1 a.m. Snow was falling hard, thick flakes swirling under the streetlights, the kind of snow that muffles everything, makes the world feel padded and unreal. My feet were numb by the time I reached my house, and that's when I saw it. A small, perfectly wrapped Christmas present sitting on my front porch. Red paper, gold ribbon, a tight, flawless bow right in the center. At first, I just stared at it, confused. I hadn't spoken to most of my family since the funeral. My neighbors barely made eye contact with me anymore. No one gave me gifts. No one even visited. But what truly froze me wasn't the gift itself. It was the snow. There were no footprints, no drag marks, no dents, no signs anyone had walked up to the house. The box looked like it had been placed there gently, carefully, but impossibly. I should have left it alone. Something inside me whispered that. But I picked it up anyway. It was light. Too light. Almost like a child's toy. My heartbeat quickened as I took it inside, shutting the door firmly behind me. The house felt colder than usual, like something had followed me inside. I placed the gift on the kitchen table. My hands shook as I peeled the tape and lifted the lid. The breath left my body. Inside the box was a stuffed animal, a faded pink rabbit with one bent ear and a tiny stitched nose. Her rabbit, my daughter's favorite toy, the one she carried everywhere from the age of 2 until the day she turned 6, the one she held in her hands inside her coffin. I dropped the box so fast it slid across the floor and hit the cabinet. My chest tightened and I had to brace myself against the counter just to stay upright. I wasn't imagining it. It was the same rabbit. I knew every worn patch, every loose thread, every discoloration from years of being loved too hard. I'd buried that toy. I knew I had. I remember placing it on her chest, smoothing the blanket over it through tears I couldn't stop. So how was it sitting on my kitchen floor? I didn't want to touch it again, but I couldn't stop staring at it either. That's when I heard the first sound. A soft hum. A quiet, shaky, childlike humming. Her humming, the melody she used to sing to herself when she couldn't sleep. Always off pitch, always slow, always comforting until that moment. The humming came from the hallway. Her hallway, the short corridor leading to her old bedroom. I felt myself walking toward it before my brain caught up. My heart thudded so loud I could feel it in my teeth. Every step I took made the humming louder, clearer, closer. Halfway down the hall, the humming suddenly stopped. The silence was worse. My hand touched her bedroom door. It was warmer than the rest of the house. I hadn't opened that door in nearly 2 years, not since packing up her toys and clothes, sealing away everything that reminded me of her. The door turned too easily, like the door had been opened recently. I pushed it slowly. The room was just as I had left it, bare, clean, cold, almost like a museum exhibit of a childhood that no longer existed. Except for one thing. The rabbit was sitting on her bed, propped up neatly, staring straight at the doorway. I froze. I had never placed it there. It had been in the kitchen. I watched it fall out of the box with my own eyes. My breath fogged in front of me. The temperature dropped suddenly, as though the air itself was reacting to something unseen. I whispered, "This isn't real," but a soft, faint reply echoed back. A tiny, familiar voice.
"Daddy?" My legs nearly gave out. The voice was so clear, so real, so impossibly like hers that instinct took over. I rushed into the room, searching, calling her name, checking behind furniture, inside the closet, under the bed, everywhere. Nothing. Empty. Silent. The voice had come from nowhere. Or everywhere. And the rabbit was lying face down now. I called the police at 3:08 a.m. Not because I thought they could help, but because I needed to hear another human voice. Something sane. Something grounded. 2 officers arrived. They searched the house. Every room, every closet, every window latch. No forced entry, no footprints outside, except for mine. No signs of anyone being there. When I showed them the rabbit, something flickered across one officer's face. Pity, fear, maybe both. He asked if it was possible I had put it somewhere and forgotten. I told him with a shaking voice where the rabbit had been buried. Their expressions changed instantly. The atmosphere shifted. Suddenly, neither of them wanted to be in the house anymore. Before leaving, one officer placed a hand on my shoulder. He said, "Sometimes grief makes us see things that feel real, but I hadn't imagined the humming, or the warmth of the doorknob, or the voice, and I definitely didn't imagine what I found the next morning." The rabbit was sitting at the foot of my bed, facing me. I moved out 2 weeks later, left the house fully furnished, left behind boxes of memories that hurt too much to touch, left the rabbit on the bed exactly where it appeared. I don't know who or what returned it to me. I don't want to know. But some nights, when the world is quiet and the snow falls softly, I hear her lullaby again. A faint, fragile humming drifting through the walls, calling me back to a home that doesn't belong to me anymore. And I whisper into the darkness, "I miss you too."
I've never been afraid of being alone. Not until Christmas Eve of 2016. That year, my wife was visiting her family in another state, and I stayed behind. Work had kept me busy, and I had insisted on spending the holiday quietly at home, thinking it would be peaceful. The house was decorated just enough to feel festive. Lights on the porch, a small tree in the corner, ornaments carefully hung on the branches, but quiet, too quiet. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound that immediately set my instincts on fire. Glass shattering. Not the usual creak of the house settling in the cold, not the sound of wind rattling a window. This was deliberate, sharp, breaking. I leapt out of bed, my heart hammering, and grabbed the baseball bat I kept near the door. Each step down the stairs felt heavy, like the floorboards themselves were warning me to stop. I reached the living room and froze. The back window was shattered. Jagged glass lay scattered across the floor, sparkling faintly in the glow of the Christmas lights. The wind rushed through the gap, carrying a chill that made my skin crawl. My first thought was a break-in, of course, but nothing had been stolen. The TV, my laptop, even the small change I keep by the door, untouched. I noticed the floor, wet footprints, trailing from the broken window across the living room toward the staircase. Large prints, adult-sized, and next to them smaller prints, barefoot, tiny, delicate, like a child, had followed the intruder inside. I gripped the bat tighter. Every instinct screamed to run, but something about the footprints froze me. They weren't random. They were deliberate. They led upstairs. I crept up the stairs slowly, listening. Every nerve in my body screamed danger, but I couldn't stop. The small footprints stopped halfway up the stairs, and then I saw it. The pattern of movement didn't match a child. The steps were too long, too narrow. They looked wrong, like fingers had pressed into the carpet, not toes. My blood ran cold. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded small, weak. The house didn't respond. The only sound was the faint rustle of the tree branches brushing the window outside. I reached the top of the stairs. Silence. Nothing. And yet, I felt it, like someone had been there, watching me. I grabbed my phone and checked the security camera I had installed in the backyard. The video made my stomach turn. At 1:59 a.m., the window shattered, but no one appeared on the footage. No silhouette, no figure, just the glass exploding inward as if it had broken on its own. Then, step by step, the footprints appeared in the snow, one after another. No legs, no shadow, just prints forming out of nowhere, moving from the yard to the house. I replayed it over and over, shaking. No explanation made sense. No human, no animal, nothing logical. I called the police again. When they arrived, the scene was even stranger.
The footprints had partially melted, leaving a distorted trail that ended midway down the yard, vanishing like they had been erased. They combed the house, checking every closet, every room, every possible hiding place. Nothing. They found no signs of forced entry besides the broken window. No stolen items, no evidence of someone entering.
One of the officers tried to comfort me, suggesting maybe the wind had broken the glass and the footprints were partially melted snow from a passing neighbor. I wanted to scream. I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. The officers left. I stayed up until sunrise, pacing the house. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I walked carefully to the staircase and froze. Among the faint melting snow prints, I saw one single small footprint, bare, wet, facing down the stairs. No child, no intruder, just the mark. I touched it with my gloved hand. Cold, damp, real. It was like something had been standing there, watching me, waiting. I didn't know whether to be relieved that nothing had moved or terrified that something unseen had left that mark behind. I couldn't stay in that house. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, an animal, a trick of the snow, but I couldn't. I moved out a week later, took the essentials, left everything else. The tree, the ornaments, the broken window, everything. Even now, years later, I can't drive past that street without my chest tightening. I still dream about that night. The sound of glass, the cold air rushing through the room, the wet footprints, the tiny, unnatural footprint facing down the stairs, like something had been waiting for me to leave. Sometimes when the wind is just right, I swear I hear it again. A soft, careful patter on the wooden floor. Slow, intentional, watching. And I know whoever or whatever was in that house that night isn't gone. They're just waiting for Christmas Eve.
Christmas is supposed to be a time of warmth, laughter, and family. But for some people, it becomes the night they never forget. Whether these stories came from disturbed individuals, supernatural forces, or something in between, one thing is clear. Even on the brightest nights of the year, shadows still find a way in. If you want more true horror stories, make sure you like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. And whatever you do, keep your doors locked this Christmas.